Okay, I want you to picture a scenario. It's, say, 9 p.m. on a Sunday night.
Oh, the worst time.
The worst. And you've had an absolutely terrible day. Maybe you got passed over for a promotion. Maybe you're going through a breakup.
Or just that Sunday night doom, that gray fog.
Exactly. That heavy, inexplicable grief that just lands on you. So you get home, collapse on the couch, and you reach for your headphones. Now, if we were being purely logical, you'd put on something upbeat, right? You'd blast some pop, some fun.
Something to snap you out of it.
Right. Your dopamine firing. But you don't do that.
No, you do the exact opposite.
You scroll right past the happy hits, and you find the saddest, slowest, most heartbreaking song in your library.
That one track.
You put on that track that makes you want to curl into a ball. And then, this is the weirdest part, you put it on repeat.
It's the classic feeding the sadness ritual.
But if you stop and actually think about that, it's incredibly counterintuitive. Why do we do that? If you touch a hot stove, you don't lean into it. But with emotional pain, we seem to want to just wallow. Are we gluttons for punishment?
It feels like a contradiction, doesn't it? But it's actually one of the most fascinating quirks of human psychology.
Okay.
We aren't doing it to feel worse. There's actually a massive biological and evolutionary benefit to it.
And that is exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at a really compelling column from MMR.
Monumental Movement Records.
Right. It's titled, Why People Listen to Sad Music When They Are Sad. And I have to say, when I first saw this, I expected a fluff piece. You know, it's okay to cry.
But it's not that at all.
Not at all. It's surprisingly dense. It goes into neuroscience, psychology, even cultural history. It argues this habit isn't a glitch, it's a feature.
What I love about this source is how it explains that our brains are wired in ways that, well, they don't always make logical sense on the surface. But they make perfect sense when you look at how we survive trauma.
So let's unpack this. We have to start with the hardware, the brain. The source talks about the sadness paradox, what's actually happening in our heads.
So biologically, when you feel sad, your brain is in a state of stress. You're activating the amygdala, that's the emotion center. And the prefrontal cortex is working overtime. Usually the brain treats this as a threat, an avoidance signal.
Right, like this feels bad, stop doing it.
Precisely. But here's the paradox. When you introduce sad music to that equation, the brain triggers the release of dopamine.
Wait, hold on. Dopamine.
Yes.
But isn't dopamine the reward chemical? Like what I get when I eat a donut.
Yeah.
Why is my brain rewarding me for listening to a song about dying alone?
That is the million-dollar question. And the source argues it's because the music acts as what they call a neural mirror.
I circled that term. A neural mirror. It sounds incredibly cool, but I'm not sure I fully get it. Is it just reflecting the feeling back?
Think of it less like a bathroom mirror and more like a simulation. When you're just sad in the real world, you're the victim of the emotion. You're drowning in it. But when you listen to music that mirrors that sadness, your brain shifts gears.
How so?
It performs an emotional reconstruction.
So it's about control.
It's about distance. By listening to the music, you're projecting that emotion outside of yourself. You become an observer of the sadness.
Oh, instead of just the vessel for it.
Exactly. The dopamine isn't rewarding the pain itself. It's rewarding the successful processing of the pain.
That's actually really profound. So the music creates a sort of safe container for the feeling.
That's it. The source calls it pleasure amidst sadness. Think of it like a horror movie. You get the intensity of fear, but you know you're safe. Sad music does the same thing for sadness. It engages your reward system because you're processing a heavy emotion without the real-life threat.
It's a flight simulator for grief. You get the experience, but you don't crash the plane.
That is a perfect analogy, and that leads directly into the psychological side, because it's not just chemicals, it's about connection.
Right.
The source references a psychologist, Catherine Mercier, who calls music an empathy imitation device.
Empathy imitation device. This sounds a little dystopian, like a robot learning to love.
It does sound a bit sci-fi, but the concept is deeply human. Think about our evolutionary history. When a human is sad, what's the natural instinct?
To withdraw. Go to my room, lock the door, talk to no one.
Right, isolation. But for early humans, isolation was dangerous. We survive in packs. So Mercier argues music hacks this isolation instinct.
How does a song hack isolation if I'm listening to it alone?
Because the brain interprets the music as a presence. The source calls it the other in the room.
Interesting.
When you hear that cracking voice in a ballad or a mournful cello, your brain simulates the presence of someone else who feels what you're feeling.
So even if I'm physically alone, my brain thinks I'm in a group.
Essentially, yes. You feel the composer's pain, the singer's pain. You assimilate with it, and that validates your own feeling. It breaks the loneliness loop.
This reminds me of how universal this is. The source mentions funerals, requiems, prayers.
The labor songs example really stuck with me from the text.
Oh, right, the field hollers.
Exactly. If you look at historical labor songs or slave spirituals, they were often incredibly mournful about struggle and pain, but they were sung collectively.
So it wasn't just complaining, it was connecting.
It was a communal healing structure,
Yeah.
a way of saying we're all in this together without having to stop working for a group therapy session.
It's amazing how music can say things that words just can't. Which actually brings us to another huge theme here. Memory.
Oh, completely.
Because sad music isn't just about the present, is it? It's usually about the past.
Yeah, the source calls this musical recall. They describe melody as an editing tool for memory, which I thought was a fascinating phrase.
It is.
It's so accurate, though. A raw memory of a hard time is messy, just a jumble of bad feelings. But when you attach a song to it, you give it a structure.
A beginning, a middle, and an end.
Exactly.
That's so true. I have certain albums that instantly transport me back to a specific year. I can smell the air.
Right. There's a quote in the source from Romain Rolland. Music is the only art that makes time visible.
Makes time visible. That's beautiful.
It gives shape to these otherwise abstract, invisible feelings. It helps us organize our past so we can carry it.
Now, this idea of organizing sadness, giving it a shape, brings us to what I think is the most interesting part of this deep dive, the cultural part. Because, let's be honest, in the West, we aren't great at being sad.
No. Sadness is a problem to be solved.
Right. It's cheer up, don't cry, look on the bright side. We treat it like a malfunction. But the article talks about the Japanese concept of mono no aware.
Which is pretty much the polar opposite of that. It's a difficult term to translate perfectly, but it's something like the pathos of things.
Empathy toward things.
Yeah, but it's deeper than just feeling sad. Think about a cherry blossom falling. In the West, we might see it as, that's sad, it's over.
A negative.
But in the aesthetic of mono no aware, the fact that the flower is fragile and temporary is exactly what makes it beautiful.
So the sadness isn't a bug, it's the feature.
Exactly. Mono aware affirms sadness as a beautiful emotion. It's not something to be denied. The source mentions traditions like gagaku court music or the biwa hoshi.
The blind lute priests.
Yes, they would travel around playing the lute, telling these incredibly sorrowful stories of fallen heroes, but the culture saw it as a way to purify the emotion.
Purify. That's such a key word difference from fix.
It changes the entire goal. If you view crying as a breakdown, you feel weak. But through this lens, crying is a ritual of purification. A social reconnection.
That just sounds so much healthier than stuffing your feelings down.
It really is. And the source actually lays out this timeline of the sound of sadness to show how different societies have handled this.
That timeline was wild. It starts all the way back in ancient Greece, like 500 BC.
With the threnos, collective mourning, you'd have professional mourners, the whole community wailing together. It was loud public share.
And then we jump to the Baroque period with the lament, which turned grief into this high operatic art.
Then the modern era gives us the blues, which was deeply about social pain. And then the 90s gave us grunge.
Which was pure isolation. Flannel shirts and angst.
Exactly. But notice the trend. We move from the village square to the bedroom.
Which brings us to today. The source identifies the current sound of sadness as genres like lo-fi hip-hop and emo rap.
Yeah, but they argue the biggest shift isn't the music itself, it's the delivery.
Digital emotion.
It sounds so 2026, doesn't it?
It really does. But it's true. Think about algorithms. Spotify, YouTube. You listen to one sad song, and the algorithm immediately knows.
Oh, yeah.
It starts recommending sad songs or rainy mood playlists. It's like the machine is diagnosing you.
Oh, you're sad today. Here is a curated list of despair.
It can feel invasive.
Yeah.
But the source makes this really interesting kind of optimistic point about it. It calls it anonymous connection.
I was skeptical about that part. How is a playlist a connection?
Well, picture this. You're alone in your room listening to a lo-fi beats to cry to playlist. You feel totally isolated. But then you look at the screen and you see 50,000 others are listening right now.
Okay, when you put it that way, that is a powerful image.
You're alone, but you're effectively in a digital stadium with 50,000 other people feeling the exact same way.
Sharing silence and empathy through a playlist.
It's a decentralized version of that ancient Greek morning ritual. We're just doing it through screens.
Exactly. We're outsourcing the curation of our emotions, but the fundamental human need to show that sadness is still there.
So we've covered the brain, the culture, the tech. Let's get practical. The source moves into the 2020s and the reevaluation of music therapy. Is this actually considered medicine now?
It's increasingly being treated that way, yes. The source highlights that music isn't just entertainment. It's a clinical tool for emotional recovery.
What's physically happening to the body when we use it this way?
Several things. It increases alpha waves in the brain, which are linked to relaxation. But the big one is HRV, heart rate variability.
That's a stress metric, right?
It's the stress metric. A stable HRV means your nervous system is resilient. And listening to this kind of music literally calms your heart down. It stabilizes your HRV.
Wow.
And maybe most importantly, it helps externalize emotions that are too hard to put into words, the translator effect.
Yeah, sometimes you just feel heavy and you don't have the vocabulary for it.
The music acts as that translator.
The source even recommends specific albums for mind resetting, and I have to say the playlist they provided is fantastic.
It's a very curated list. They mention Max Richter's Sleep.
The 8-hour piece.
Yeah, designed to accompany a full night's rest. But the one that really stood out to me was William Basinski's The Disintegration Loops.
Oh, that is a heavy one.
Yeah.
But essential listening for this topic.
Definitely.
The backstory alone gave me chills. Can you share that for our listeners?
Sure. So Basinski was trying to digitize these old magnetic tape loops he'd made in the 80s. But the tapes were so old that as they played, the magnetic material literally started to crack and flake off.
So the music was destroying itself as it was playing.
Well, in real time. And he just let the tape roll. So what you hear is this beautiful, mournful melody looping over and over.
But it gets worse each time.
Exactly. More gaps, more silence. It gets crackly and broken until it just fades into nothing.
Talk about a metaphor for grief.
It's the ultimate sonic representation of impermanence, of mono no aware. The source recommends it as a way to purge emotion. You're listening to something fall apart so you don't have to.
That's profound. And they also mention Zoe Wees for a more pop approach to anxiety.
Right, showing it applies across genres. Whether it's avant-garde tape loops or modern R&B, the mechanism is the same. Music as a reset button.
So looking back at all of this, we started this show thinking this was a weird, masochistic habit.
And now, it looks very different. It stops looking like a bad habit and starts looking like a complex survival mechanism.
We went from the amygdala releasing dopamine to trick us into processing pain,
To the psychological need to feel less alone through that empathy machine.
to the cultural wisdom of finding beauty in the sadness itself.
And finally, to using these digital tools and albums to medically reset our nervous systems.
The source draws this really beautiful conclusion. They say we don't listen to sad music to escape reality. We do it to regain ourselves.
Regain ourselves. I love that phrasing.
It allows us to hear our own heartbeat within the silence. That's the key. The world is noisy and chaotic, but sad music strips everything back.
It creates a space where you can actually hear yourself exist.
Yeah.
And that makes it a productive act. It's not wallowing, it's tuning.
So the next time you're having a bad day and you reach for that heartbreaking playlist, you don't need to feel guilty or weird.
Not at all. You should view it as a complex act of self-care. You're engaging in neural tuning. You are, as the source puts it, turning sadness into love.
Turning sadness into love. That's a great takeaway.
It really is.
Before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We touched on the algorithms earlier.
Digital emotion.
Right. So here's the question I've been mulling over. If algorithms are now curating our sadness for us, literally telling us what kind of sad to be and when, are we outsourcing our emotional processing to machines? Or are we unknowingly building the largest, quietest support group in human history?
That's a fascinating thought. Are we connecting with each other or just connecting with the code?
Something to mull over the next time you see that Rainy Mood playlist pop up. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Take care.